Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Scouting for Growth podcast. I cannot remember if I told you, but the podcast reached its 1 million downloads last December. As I record this intro, we have 1.2 million downloads. So thank you to all of you for your support, comments, contributions. I want to make sure we can augment those corporate collaborations and investment discussion that you might have, and we intend to do so looking at a variety of perspectives. Remember that a download, a share, or a comment makes the world to us. We read your comments, and if there is an ask that we can address, we will do our really best. Let's revert to this week's event first. Yes, it is Davos week. The 2025 World Economic Forum annual meeting is taking place in Switzerland this week, and it is expected to welcome 2,500 attendees. This will include heads of state, business leaders, and representatives from international organizations. I was all packed to go myself, but had to cancel plans last minute. I was so much looking forward to attending session with the female quotient. So thank you for inviting me. And also see my dear friend, Silvia Signoretti from the Swiss InsurTech Hub. And I'm sure I will be able to catch up with her on the events. So let's start really. The World Economic Forum, as I said, is taking place, but why I want to talk to you today, it's because WEF has released its newest 2025 Global Risks Report just a few days ago, and the insights are revealing. Think of the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report like a reality show for planet Earth, featuring epic battles between geopolitical disagreements and tech-fueled transformation. It is your backstage pass to today's biggest challenges, nudging everyone from CEOs to couch potatoes to come together and face our shared circumstances head on. So today, I am thrilled to welcome Carolina Klint. Carolina is the Managing Director and Chief Commercial Officer for Continental Europe at Marsh McLennan. Marsh McLennan, as I said, will be attending WEF, so make sure to check post-event insight on their site. Carolina will share views about the latest report and its implication for businesses and insurers worldwide. For a quick intro, Carolina has a really interesting background and experience as a risk management leader. She's also a key contributor to major global dialogues on emerging trends, evaluating threats affecting us all. So we'll ask Carolina about those critical issues, reshaping risk frameworks today, learning from her experience advising multinational organizations on strategies to anticipate, quantify, and respond to disruptions in areas such as the impact of climate change on specific markets, the implications of geopolitical shocks, and the fast evolving landscape of AI, misinformation, and cyber vulnerability. In this discussion, Carolina will shed light on the newest insights from the 2025 report. She will offer guidance on how to build resilience against uncertain market conditions. And she will outline why collective action, yes, collective action is more vital than ever in confronting systemic change. Stay tuned for a dynamic exploration of the latest risk developments and the forward-thinking solution that can help you scout for and capitalize on growth opportunities in an increasingly complex world. Carolina, thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome. Hi, Carolina. Thank you so much for joining me on Scouting for Growth today.
Hi, Sabine. Thanks for having me.
So let's dive in straight and get to really understand who you are.
Oh,
So yes, I want people to understand who you are, what you do every day. So can you tell us your role and responsibility at Marsh McLennan and how you drive growth through, I guess, your leadership style. And how does the global risk report and all the global risk work you are doing at Marsh McLennan comes together?
Yes, of course. So I am in the fortunate position to lead a team of fantastic colleagues that look at the intersection across Marsh McLennan's four companies. So Marsh McLennan has four companies, and it's Marsh, Mercer, Oliver Wyman, and Guy Carpenter. And the commercial strategies that I lead with this team of colleagues is really looking at how can we bring more value? How can we become more relevant to our clients by connecting people, risk, and strategy? And what is so fantastic about the Global Risk Report is that it speaks exactly to that. So the world is complex, the business environment is very difficult to navigate, and it's really only through collaboration and through looking at the business holistically that you can achieve a long-term sustainable business model. So it is exactly that I'm working on.
Yeah, exciting. So, the global risk report that you're actually
Mhm.
publishing with the World Economic Forum just come out, right? Days ago. And so I would love for you to help us understand how leaders can take the most of what is happening in this report to actually understand the emerging threats and
Yeah.
the emerging risk affecting us all, right?
Yeah.
This has been so many iterations. I've read the report now for many years, and I cannot wait for it to come out usually. So tell us, how can leaders take advantage of it?
If for any like anyone who's interested in risk and resilience, I think when the global risk report is out, it's like Christmas Day for a 5-year-old, right? It's like, oh, I finally can get your sink your teeth into what's new, what's happening in the world, and what are the macro risks that are coming at us on the horizon, right? So I think my goal with speaking to the report and promoting it so much is really putting the topics of risk and resilience where they belong, which is on the agenda of world leaders, decision makers, executives, board members. Again, the business environment is so complex and so difficult to navigate. And we have an environment now where risks are not only interconnected, but they are also layered on top of one another. So trying to make sense of this, I think the Global Risk Report is such a perfect starting point. The thing is that when a company looks at the risks that have the potential of impacting the strategies or the opportunities to execute on the strategies, it is so difficult to get it right. I mean, you're going to select your risks, you're going to go through scenario planning, you're going to pull together a very ambitious risk register. I mean, most companies have a really good process for this and have quite good discipline and also updating, refreshing, rethinking. The thing is, in the environment that we're working in today and navigating today, it is very rare to actually pick the risks and prepare for the risks that at the end are the ones that are going to hit you. So it is going to be something surprising, right?
Yeah.
And I often quote Mike Tyson, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And that's exactly the way it is, right? The environment gives us so many opportunities to get punched in the face. So, but the thing is that by working on a culture of risk awareness and resilience, by working on taking a holistic view, connecting the dots between people, risk, and strategy, companies that do that have a much better opportunity to deal with whatever ends up hitting them in the end. Because if you have the culture, if you have the awareness, if you empower your leaders and your employees to manage through, when something hits, it is going to become a much better outcome for you, regardless of what it is.
Yeah. So let's go into looking at some of those global risks,
Yeah, sure.
Carolina, right?
Mhm.
I saw that we divide them in the report into economic, environmental, geopolitical, societal, and technological risk, right?
Correct.
And right now, when I look at the major map, which was in the middle of the report, we can see inequality and societal polarization are
Yeah.
two of the major risks affecting us this year. Can you dive into your view of the report, the risks you see are critical for us to evaluate this year, as I'm sure everybody wants to know where they should actually pay attention and focus their
Yeah.
attention?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, again, the risk map right now is like staring down into like a bowl of spaghetti, right? It's not easy because there are so many risks. And again, they're interconnected. So you pull one strand of spaghetti in this big bowl and everything starts moving around and you don't really understand why. But so the report is really designed to look at risk over three different time horizons. And this is important to know because, again, it looks at like short term and long term. And this is something I talk to clients about all the time, the importance of not only preparing for what is right in front of us, but also taking that long term perspective. Because I think human beings are in fact wired to focus on what is exactly right in front of us. So it's easy to forget sort of the long term horizon, which where the global risk report is so helpful. So this year's report looks at the perception of risks current, 2 year, the 2 year horizon, and then the 10-year long-term risk horizon. And if we look at the current, like what is happening right now, it is state-based armed conflict, it is extreme weather events, and it's geo-economic confrontation. And I think all of the, I mean, it comes as no surprise, right? The world is in a dire state, and we see conflict flare up. We see extreme weather events. I mean, everyone has an own experience or maybe work for a company that has had an experience of whether it's a wildfire, it's a flooding, it's something that is connected with an extreme weather event, right? And then geoeconomic confrontation, which is the economic impact of this tension that we see increasing and accelerating in the world. Then looking at the 2 year horizon, it is a little bit different. So the 2 year risk horizon starts with the number one ranking being the same as last year, which is misinformation and disinformation. So this is a topic that is still very high on the minds of the respondents to this year's report. And that's interesting in itself, right? It's very much fueled by the synthetic content produced by artificial intelligence, right? How easy it is suddenly to produce large quantities of false content, but also how easy it is to get that false content out to large populations and big masses. And of course, last year, it was very impacted by the fact that we had major economies going to the polls to vote last year and this year, right? So that was like the driving factor beneath it. But then we see this spilling over into this year, and it is still a conversation very much around artificial intelligence. So there is a connectivity there. The second highest ranked risk over the 2 year horizon is extreme weather events. So very much like the current outlook, for the 2 year outlook, it is extreme weather events. This is interesting because in previous years, what we've seen is a tendency to push out environmental risks on the longer term. So environmental risks have traditionally been thought of as something that, we have time. It's okay. It's there. We understand that we need to do something about it, but it's okay, we have time. Now, all of a sudden, it's current, it's 2 year, which means that the respondents feel that it's impacting us now. We can feel the impacts and the effects of extreme weather events, and we need to address it sooner rather than later. And then the third ranked risk on the 2 year horizon is state-based armed conflict. There's a lot of tension in the world. We see it flaring up. There's a lot of concern from the respondents in terms of where is this headed? What is going to happen next? And then if we look at the longer term, it is a very green outlook. So environmental risks, environmental risks, environmental risks. So the top ranked risks on the 10-year horizon is extreme weather events, biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse, critical change to Earth systems, and then natural resource shortages. So the top four highest ranked risks long-term are all linked to the environment. And then it's interesting to note that we have some digital risks. So we have misinformation, disinformation, adverse outcomes of AI technologies, and then cyber espionage and warfare. But what is interesting to note that state-based armed conflict and geoeconomic confrontation is not found in the top 10 rankings long-term. So this is likely something that respondents either feel that we will get our arms around and it will calm down a little bit, or they feel that the environmental risks are just much more urgent. So that is why the geoeconomic and geopolitical risks are being pushed down a little bit. That's a long answer to your question, but that is
a superb answer. It's a superb answer. And so I think I would like to divide, that AI and misinformation from the climate challenge we are
Yeah.
actually, which are affecting us
Mm.
all. So when you start looking then at the problem around misinformation, disinformation,
Mm.
right? It was, as you said, named as one of the top short-term risks in
Yes.
the report. And that is driven by artificial intelligence. And
Mm.
so what strategies should executives start considering when you start also looking at the implication around cybersecurity and technological threats?
Yes, and that's a great question. So to start with, I would say it's important to reflect on the fact that the proliferation and the like misinformation and disinformation that we see in the world is fueling an instability that is undermining trust across the board. So, like the foundation of this, and where you need to start thinking about this, the outlook you need to have is the fact that there's suspicion. There's suspicion in the world and suspicion across the across the gambit, like everywhere there's suspicion. So I think for a company, it is really critical to look at cybersecurity from a perspective of artificially produced content. And it's also important to look at cybersecurity from the perspective of increased escalating geopolitical tensions. So we're going to see advanced cybercrime tactics, and cybercrime is an element in hybrid warfare, where, of course, artificial intelligence can be leveraged to create false content. I mean, you could imagine a scenario now in this geopolitical tense world where a state-sponsored attack could take place on a private company, in fact, due to a desire to bring a specific brand down because you want to promote national production of a specific goods or something. So there are a lot of different scenarios that could play out and that are quite, I mean, more likely to play out now than they've ever been before. So I think it's like the report really calls for a shift from traditional cybersecurity to more thinking about an enhanced cyber resilience strategy, really emphasizing collaboration, because again, this is not an issue or a risk that one stakeholder can solve on their own. We need to come together and collaborate to really have this prioritized by leadership, but also addressing like the wider cyber skills gap to keep your employees trained, up to date, and have a cyber mindset. So that is what I would recommend that companies focus on.
Yes, and I think another point which came to mind whilst you are talking about that disinformation and misinformation threat is, when you look at 2025, is looking at your AI governance and ethical principles and trustworthy framework you can actually implement upfront before you start pushing AI within your organization. I was doing a lot of work around agentic AI, looking at a lot of research on that. Fascinating what you can do with agents, but at the
Oh,
same
yeah.
time, you have to control them, right?
Oh, yeah. That's it. And the thing is, I mean, we have to recognize the fact that we're part of an ecosystem because the report talks a lot about economic fragmentation and the impact on already quite vulnerable supply chains. And then it's easy to jump into conversation around physical supply chains. But, it's equally important to think about digital supply chains and the way that every company is part of an ecosystem, because everything we depend on, whether it's the financial system, whether it's communication, whether it's energy, all of it is really dependent on a chain and a network of digital connectivity that is so vulnerable.
Which goes
So it's
back to
just
your
that,
point around interconnected world we are in.
yes, exactly.
Which takes us to climate change,
Yes,
environmental change.
yes.
We've seen
Mhm.
some really emotional things happening in Los Angeles. We have friends,
Mhm.
Carolina, investors with homes in
Mhm.
that region of the world who have lost their homes. They have literally lost their homes. So when we start looking at climate change, you mentioned biodiversity,
Mhm.
critical change in Earth system,
Yeah,
natural resource shortage. This looks like it's long, it's far, it's 10 years
yeah.
from now. My
Mhm.
view is we need to start addressing this today. But
Oh, yeah.
so what's your view, executives, leaders, transformation experts should consider to actually start strategizing to do something so that we
Yeah.
can protect ourselves?
So I think, I mean, first of all, really, I think it's good that you highlight this disaster that is happening in California because it is heartbreaking to see, right? 100 100,000 people dislocated from their homes. And of course, it's also important to recognize from an insurance point of view that there's a huge coverage gap. I mean, there's a lot at stake here, and we don't even know. I mean, is this going to be the big green swan event that finally puts environmental risks and climate change and extreme weather events on the map, like finally, because it is a huge, large-scale environmental catastrophe that we don't really know. In fact, we don't know how this is going to impact the economy and what the ramifications are going to be of this event, right? So I think it is for sure. You are right when you say that it's something that we need to address this now. And now we have a little bit of a polarized view here, because at the same time as the world is moving towards more nationalistic trends, is more self-sufficiency, it's actually a decline in the collaboration in the world. We don't see much multilateralism right now, but at the same time, we need it more than ever. So the only way that we can get our arms around and start addressing some of these large systemic risks, cyber being one, climate change, extreme weather events is being another really critical one, is by coming together, collaborating. And it's not only public-private partnerships within countries. It's important to find ways of collaborating within a country, but these risks know no borders. I mean, these are risks that are global and they're humongous. So I would strongly recommend and say to world leaders or executives or anyone willing to listen, please try and find ways to collaborate. And I know it might seem naive in this environment that we currently have, with the geopolitical tensions heating up, and it's like very much you're on your own, that kind of mentality and the narrative. But I think the only way that we're actually going to be able to solve this is by coming together and collaborating more actively.
Yeah, and I've been talking since November after, this big event we attend in Vegas. We built a think tank there, and a number of insurers have asked us to dive into risk resilience and
Yes.
build something that they can participate. So we are shaping that. We are interviewing a lot of people around shaping this in the way they want it to be. So let's see where we go. But you mentioned the protection gap. And, I live in London, and the cost of living crisis, prolonged inflationary pressure, I would say a resource shortage, in the sense that you could not find sometimes what you are looking for, has been not only a problem in our economy, but I'm sure across economies, and it has been highlighted in the previous reports. So what do you think are going to be the things we need to do, right, to start addressing that macroeconomic challenge?
Yes. So I mean, I think it's great that you're rallying the insurance industry and that you're creating platforms to have these conversations. It is fantastic. The emerging risks that we see, like climate change, cyber threats, we talked about that, geopolitical tensions, we have a public health crisis. I mean, it's like insurers, of course, need to watch this carefully, because as awareness of risks grow, we will see an increased demand for insurance products to cover these emerging risks. So I think it's critical for insurance companies to lean into the changing risk environment, of course. I mean, the beautiful thing about the insurance industry is that it's a lot of people that really understand risk and resilience, right? So, and there are two sides of this coin, because on the one side, it's not fair to expect the insurance industry to cover the insurance gap from a capital point of view. It doesn't work. I mean, insurance companies are private companies. They have shareholders like any other company. And sometimes it feels a little bit like the expectation is that the insurance will pay. It doesn't really work that way. And the only way to get around that is, of course, by driving for these large systemic risks that are more and more uninsurable. It's important to drive another capital mechanism, like who's going to fund for it. But at the same time, the other side of the coin is that it's a missed opportunity not to lean on the expertise, the knowledge, the experience of the insurance industry when it comes to structuring, managing, leading, initiatives in how do you deal with this when it comes to risk and resilience. And I think finding opportunities to connect the dots, finding the capital, but then also leveraging the knowledge and the know-how of the insurance industry, that is when we can start seeing really, really solutions being developed.
Yeah, you're already diving into solutions and opportunities. So
Mm.
let's look into what consideration insurers, insurance providers need to think about. There is a lot of talk around public-private partnership, and you already
Mm.
highlighted that.
Yeah.
There is probably looking at data closely to
Oh, yeah.
actually deliver the solution that will fulfill the need of our underserved population, but also make insurance affordable,
Mm.
right? You mentioned the geopolitical and economic challenges.
Mm.
What are some of the strategies we should
Yeah.
be looking at from an opportunity viewpoint?
Yeah, and I want to take back because you said data, and I love that you brought that up as a topic because data-driven decision making is going to be of increasing importance, really. I mean, the importance of using data analytics in understanding and managing risks. So the insurance industry is a data-heavy industry, right? And when you look at risk, there's always benefit in like bringing out trends, themes, drawing conclusion based on data. So I think this, like the data analytics the modeling techniques to better assess risks. I mean, this is going to be of utmost importance. I think really, if there's one area that I would highlight, that is it. And also, in fact, leveraging artificial intelligence. I mean, for any data-heavy industry, AI is an excellent tool to turn data into actionable insights. I mean, you can sift through so huge data sets that we have in the past we haven't had that opportunity, and all of a sudden now it's available to us.
Yeah.
So,
So there are two areas I would like to dive into with you, underwriting and claims. So
mhm.
when I start looking at underwriting, right, we are seeing shifts in underwriting strategies. And I did a lot of work around risk assessment and underwriting last year because of generative AI, right? We looked into, what can be done to do things faster, underwrite much faster product and services, and find the right customer segments while using AI-led, generative AI, but
Yeah.
AI-led prompting strategies. But on the other side, with what happened in the healthcare sector in the claim, we have seen algorithmic programs used in the wrong way, where we had seen algorithmic denials. So what are your recommendations from an underwriting and claims viewpoint?
No, I think starting to leverage playing around testing different AI tools. I think that is where you need to start. Always, of course, recognizing the fact that AI will not, I mean, it's not like something you can just like put everything you have in AI and it will give you the solution. You have to actually train your people to partner with AI because this is the only way that you can sanity check and make sure that whatever output you decide to then use as the basis for your decision making is reasonable, because AI, with all the benefits it also has some vulnerabilities and some challenges that you need to be aware of. So it is again having a thoughtful strategy when it comes to leveraging artificial intelligence, but absolutely starting to look at how it can support faster decision making. I think the speed and efficiency that the insurance industry can gain by leveraging AI is we've only scratched the surface so far. But then on the claim side, of course, and I grew up in claims, so my heart it's beating for claims. This is really the moment of truth in the insurance industry, and again getting the decision right. I mean, it needs to be quick, yes, and you can of course leverage AI to run through and compare a scenario or an incident or something that in fact happened with the wording and what was meant and the intention of the wording at the time of the contract. But then making sure that you sanity check it and that you follow that process closely is very important, because at the end of the day, the insurance policy should be there to help, but it's also there to deliver on the intent of the contract at the time it was written.
Yeah, and still, we are talking about contract. So you have spoken
Yeah.
about the interconnected nature of risk.
Yeah.
So when you start now looking at how we can do better, looking at it from a cross-sector strategy, you said, we are becoming more siloed. How do we actually start removing those barriers we are creating for ourselves? Breaking silos within the enterprise, breaking silos between enterprises to build resiliency across the insurance portfolio.
Well, first of all, I really want to take the opportunity to congratulate anyone that decided to have a career in risk, the risk profession. So if you picked risk as your subject, it's like, okay, perfect. You can't be more relevant or valuable than now. It is really, really interesting, in fact, how this like the opportunity for a risk manager, for example, to have a seat at the table has become better and better, right? So it's great. So, but having that awareness of the wider range of risk, including a quite like again, we talked about the holistic view of risk, but really putting all of that together in a perspective that will give senior stakeholders the sense of what is actually happening and what are the things on the risk horizon that might hit us. So what I would recommend for a company is that you don't pick the same old people that sit around the table every year to talk about risk. Invite someone unexpected. Take someone from a different region. Take someone in a different age group. Take someone else with you, because the input you will have will help you gain a much more diverse view on risk. I work with some clients that have a shadow risk committee that they put together of a group of young talents. So they pull together like a shadow committee, and they put basically the same stuff that they're going to put in front of the board. They put that in front of this shadow risk committee and ask for their input and ask them to work through the scenarios and ask them to give them feedback. And that has been really helpful and really quite surprising in some cases what they have come back with. So there are ways to surprise yourself or look at things from a different perspective or refresh the way that you conduct your risk assessments. So that is that's where I would recommend that you start, in fact.
Yeah, I love the point you have done around learning differently. I work with organization where we have looked at reversed learning. So I am
Yeah.
the big boss, but actually I'm going to learn from a junior person. I've seen that, for example, around parametric, and I think some of the results have opened people's mind, executive minds around the potential. I mean, I always say parametrics is like having a prepaid credit card or debit card, but then you have layers, right, of other products and services you have to have that parametric, but then you still need other products to support your business or your life. So that is the first one. Now, when I talk to young people about
Yes.
insurance, many of them said, insurance is boring. Sabine, why are you in insurance? I said, well, insurance is one of the industry like banking, like retail, where I'm lucky to be able to do strategy and look at risk in different ways. So think about any sector you may actually love out there, maybe fashion or retail. Well, you can, in insurance, work with fashion providers and retail providers. But the only things you need to do is look at it from a risk viewpoint, risk transfer, risk mitigation, risk adoption. You put risk and a word behind or a verb behind it, and that is what we do every day. And so hopefully it's help change the mindset of young
Yeah.
people about the industry. How do you do it, Carolina, in your organization?
So I totally agree with you. I think it's also important to talk about the way that, risk and the insurance industry enables, and not only get focused. Like, it's so easy to get stuck on, but insurance is just a cost and risk is just depressing and no one wants. No, it's not that. In fact, if you are a risk professional, you can enable a company achieving their strategies, helping them achieve delivering on their financial goals, helping them achieve, it's a positive thing. It's something that should be viewed against the backdrop of a complex environment where a risk professional can really be the enabler, the one that really navigates past the hurdles and this is where I think it's so much fun. It's an incredibly privileged position to be in. So what I would also recommend, something that I've been thinking about quite a lot, and I'm interested to try this theory on you, is I think risk professionals, risk managers, and maybe also members of the, if you work in the insurance industry, one thing that we haven't really focused on in the past that I think is becoming increasingly important is communication skills, storytelling. Like, how do we paint a compelling picture of the value that we drive and what we contribute with? And I don't think we've focused on this in the past. It's like, okay, we do this and we're a little bit under the radar, and no one's really speaking up and being totally proud of the trade that we represent. And I think it's time to change that. We need to change the narrative, because that is also the way that we can attract young talent to the industry.
I so much agree. And There was one video I shared at the end of last year, which was about how young people, Gen Zs, like being communicated with. And even when you start looking at sustainability and climate change, the ask they have is like, let's have fun with it.
Yeah.
Educate us by actually having humor in the way you communicate with us. As you know, I like social media. I find it an interesting platform because it's data driven. So I know what the results are
Mm.
from putting a post or having an impact on our industry. But for me, this is a perfect channel to educate our industry and others who actually may have blind spots actually around what they think the industry is about, which takes me to my next question actually. What particular blind spot do you think that companies, insurers are overlooking right now and they absolutely must look into in 2025?
So what I found notably absent from the report this year, I have to say, is one, you don't really have any economic risks featured anywhere. So inflation, nothing like that is listed in the top 10 categories across any of the time horizons. And I think it's just, I mean, it's interesting to think about because in fact, the geopolitical environment that we're navigating now and with the geoeconomic consequences that will come, I mean, in the shape of trade barriers, sanctions, trade wars. I mean, you can imagine a number of different scenarios. Of course, it's going to drive cost. Of course, it will become more difficult. And I mean, for companies that have shifted from a just-in-time methodology to a just-in-case methodology, for either one of those companies, it's going to drive additional cost and difficulties in getting people or goods moved across the world. This is going to drive cost. So, and that means that it's not far-fetched that we will trigger another round of inflation, right? So I think the connectivity there is quite close, and I do think it's being underestimated in this year's report. The second thing that I'll point out is that infectious diseases, nowhere to be found. We do not want to talk about the risk for another pandemic. And in my book, in fact, it's not about if, it's when. When is it going to come? Because it will come. And I mean, now we have this bout of bird flu, right, in the US. So it's already like, oh, you can feel that there are things and signs that we might see something similar hit again. But it's nowhere to be found, and we don't talk about it. We don't really take the time to reflect on the lessons learned from COVID-19. What are the things that we need to focus on building resilience for the next pandemic? And what are the things that worked well? And what are the things that we need to improve? And again, it is concerning given how the narrative develops, the societal polarization, the polarized narrative between states, because when the next pandemic hits, we are going to have to come together and collaborate. So, it's things like that keep me awake at night.
Which means that you're very busy, right? So, so which takes me to actually helping, those senior executives who are there, who are going to listen to our conversation. They need to talk about the balance between short-term, right, strategies, cost-driven risk management, and long-term systemic challenges. How do they do that, Carolina?
Well, they start by having those conversations and really moving from that short term. I mean, to me, short term is really about having a good crisis management plan, right? When crisis hit, what happens? Who does what? And how do we manage communications? How do we manage? I mean, one of the lessons learned that I've seen in so many companies is that when a crisis hits a company, it is really important that the whole executive management team doesn't get bogged down in it. So it's better to create a core group that manages the crisis, and then the rest of the management team can actually focus on the business as usual, because otherwise the whole company will be pulled into crisis mode, and that is a huge risk, in fact. So having a plan for how you manage the short term, the crisis that can hit you right now, but balancing that with thinking about what are the long-term risks that could potentially hit us. And again, it's difficult to pick because the ones you pick are probably not the ones that are going to hit you, but it doesn't matter, because thinking about it, talking about how to build long-term resilience, thinking and talking about how you connect your strategies with the direction that you can model by looking at the themes and the risk trends, because there are also a lot of opportunities. And many companies have been pretty good at reading the business environment, the horizon, what is coming towards us, and then they've made quick plans to, for example, open up a factory in a different geography than they had initially planned, or making decisions based on how things are in fact developing. And that will build a much more sustainable strategy for the future. You will just become better. So I think those are the things that are important in my book. And then, of course, as I talked about, taking a holistic view, having diversity around the table, and then really putting some actions behind the plans.
Looking at the World Economic Forum and all the events that your team has been organizing, can you tell us where they should go and what they should be looking for when they look at what Marsh McLennan is planning to do with this report and, I guess, educating the world around how to become better prepared?
So I would say lean in, learn something new. Maybe you go to a workshop or you go and listen to a presenter on a topic that maybe is not necessarily the first thing you would pick, but it will open up and give you a new perspective. What is interesting is that many times you walk away from a session like that and you're like, okay, this is really interesting. And it connects with something else that I was thinking about. So be a little bit more open and curious. And then the third thing, look out for opportunities to collaborate, because in this fragmented, difficult, complex world with so many, counterproductive, aggressive narratives, I think we need to have a grassroots drive of collaborative efforts and a counterbalance against what is playing out on the world arena.
Yeah. So my final question to you is, if you had one single overarching message for our insurance leaders out there, what would you like them to remember from the Global Risk 2025 World Economic Forum report? What would be the core takeaways you would want them to actually not to forget and to remember and action in 2025?
So for leaders in the insurance industry and for risk professionals, I would say leverage the Global Risks Report. It is written for a very senior stakeholder group. It is really written for world leaders, for senior executives, for board members. Use that to put risk on the agenda. And the second thing I'll remind you is that you matter. You are so relevant. You have so much value to come with and contribute with. And it is this is your time to shine. So be proud. Involve yourself, take a seat at the table. That is what I would recommend.
And so if one of our listeners, our senior executive listener, whether in insurance, reinsurance, across the globe, would want to get in touch with you, Carolina, what should they do?
Well, I am easy to find. LinkedIn is a good tool, so feel free to connect.
Thank you so much, Carolina, for joining me today on Scouting for Growth.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Scouting for Growth. Please subscribe, share with friends, and leave a 5-star rating. Your rating is so valuable. I review all of them, and my team help me adapt content to meet your needs. Also, connect with me on my preferred channels. I am a B2B growth expert, so you will find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Threads, and X as well as Blue Sky. All information available below. Until next, keep scouting for growth.